Yeah.
Alright, hello guys, welcome back. It's the Two Wheel Demon here. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And it's been a long time coming to make this little video here, but what we're sitting on today is the Honda Grom clone from Venom. It's also the X20. There's other names these are known by, but this one has been drastically modified from what they gave me, and I will tell you all about that while we're riding around. But for starters, we'll start it up, get it going, and see how this goes. Well, I'll turn the gas back on. These are carbureted, they're not fuel injected like the typical Grom, so you do have a fuel switch on the down there on it. With this one having an aftermarket carburetor, it's up here on the front, but on the normal ones it's down here on the side. But alright, off, here we go. These are actually decent little bikes for what they are. They're about, some of them, there's some cheaper ones that run about $1,300. This one in particular runs about $17, $18 on average with Venom. They ship it to your front door. And if you saw my last video, it arrived virtually unscathed. It took a little while for it to get here, but it showed up really well. Try and get out in traffic here without getting ran over by somebody, but there was no issues with the shipping company. I know some people have problems with that, and I was fortunate not to be one of those. But we did have the storm Imelda that came in right in the middle of the process with mine, and so it actually delayed me about a week of getting the bike. So hopefully you can hear me, hopefully the audio is better. I changed the mic out from the one I used last time, so I haven't tried this one while out riding around, so we'll see just exactly how well this does. We'll jump off the main road here and get onto some back roads where we can get a little less wind noise. Now, one thing about this bike is you'll see the speedometer. Honestly, it's closer to about 10 miles an hour off. So, I mean, you just kind of got to factor that in. And I've looked into the settings in it, and this one, for whatever reason, you can do you can go into the menus, but it doesn't give you a good way to change what the calibration is. If you get over 55 on this one, on these bikes, they come, obviously they're cheaper because these are less than $2,000. The Grom is about $3,500 retail. And so the one big problem I have on these is you'll see it shimmies, and the problem is the tires are just absolute garbage on these. So if you get one of these, I strongly suggest that you get new tires for it, like first thing. And that, along with a new carburetor and an exhaust. So those three things, you'll have a decent bike. Now, let's talk about some of the issues I had. The day I got the bike, pulled it out of the box, it fired right up. Seemed all as well. Drove it around the neighborhood a few times, put about 4 or 5 miles on it, plus or minus. And it started developing issues where it would just stall out after so long. And so Venom tried telling me that it was a carburetor issue and they would send me an upgraded one. Well, by the time I had talked to them, I had already ordered the performance one, the Makuni VM22. And if you have one of these bikes, you definitely need to order that carburetor because it changes the whole bike. And it changes the intake, changes everything about it. Once you get it jetted correctly for your area, it's a decent running little bike. Like right now, it's running pretty smooth. And it's about 55, 60 degrees outside today. So what I wound up doing is I took the bike apart, pulled carburetor off, put on the new one, and also I found out the check valve on the fuel tank was bad, which is another common thing on these. So what I did to remedy that is you take off all the emission system, you take off the check valve, you take off all that, and basically now it vents to atmosphere, which some people who are real environmentalists may not like too much, but bikes have done that for years, so it's not hurting anything, and it's been like that since I bought the bike. The emission system, that's another one of them things for you tree huggers out there. You're not going to like that, but it freed up some power on the bike, made it run better, made it feel better. So realistically, it's worth it. A motorcycle doesn't need emission stuff. You're getting 60, 70 miles per gallon, and if you can't be cool with that, then you got other problems. Now, let's see, what else? What was the next thing? Okay, so the next thing, I got it all together, put a new carburetor on it, had everything set up, everything worked, got it jetted, drove it around, all that process, and I took it on its first real maiden ride. And which by that I mean actually getting out of the neighborhood and actually just getting it up to speed and seeing if it was going to keep working and be any kind of reliable. And I rode out of the neighborhood, down the street like 2 or 3 miles, and came back. And when I got home, I got off the bike, looked behind me, and there was a trail of oil all the way up my driveway and down the street. Also, and then it was just pouring out of the bottom of the motor on this thing. So naturally I was less than pleased with Venom on that part too. And one of the it seemed like it was coming from the chain, from the sprocket, behind the sprocket, like a gear, like the bearing back there, or the seal was leaking. And I called Venom, told him what was going on. And yes, I'm very mechanically inclined when it comes to working on motorcycles, cars, or anything of that such, but I told them, because they were trying to tell me, just here, we'll send you parts and you fix the motor, which involves me pulling the motor apart. And it's like, that's not what I should have to do on a brand new motorcycle. So going back and forth with that, I told them I didn't trust a motor that didn't survive one street drive, you know, one good 15-minute cruise, or even less than that. And I told them, I was like, the only really acceptable thing to do would be send me another motor. And after a little bit of talking and going back and forth, they agreed to a new motor. And so fast forward about 2 or 3 weeks later, I say 2 or 3 weeks, probably 2 weeks tops, they sent me the new motor. It showed up, kind of. The new motor, they had sent it, I guess they drop shipped them or something, because they asked me, they wanted me to return the motor that's on this bike, and they told me, they're like, take it off, put the new motor in, drain the oil out of the old motor, and send it to us dry. But yet, they couldn't return the same courtesy to me to send me the new motor. So the new motor showed up, well, I don't think I put the video in the first one, but the motor showed up in a box that was beat to daylight. It had just nothing left of the box. There was no packaging inside of it other than like 2 or 3 little small broken pieces of styrofoam. And the motor was full of oil when they sent it. And on the box, nothing said fragile, nothing said this side up, nothing said anything like that. So that being said, the motor was on my porch upside down when I got home from work. So when I finally opened it, the motor was completely drenched in oil. Just 100% soaked, everything. And the box, like I said, was destroyed. The packaging was non-existent. And when I put the box on my counter in my workshop, bolts started falling out of the box. So at that point, I'm sitting here thinking, what exactly else is going to be missing? Well, turned out nothing was actually missing. Well, I say that. The motor was fine. It wasn't damaged. Just all the oil had leaked out of one of the vent tubes on the motor and got everywhere and made a really nasty mess. The case, or the cover for the sprocket, was missing for the new motor, because the motor that's on this bike and the motor they sent me were not the same motor. They told me it was one, it'll bolt right up, it'll plug right in, but it's a newer motor, it's a better motor. Is that true? I don't know yet. But I was even more frustrated by that point, to where I basically said, you know what, I'm going to fix the motor that's on this bike, and I'm going to run it till it dies. And then the other motor is just a spare. With all the headache they gave me, I wasn't about to swap out this motor for one that was unknowingly damaged in shipping. I didn't know if it was, didn't know if it wasn't, but I wasn't about to take that risk. So what I wound up doing was pulling this motor apart and found out the seal on the crank behind the flywheel was not even seated. So the moment the motor started running, oil pump kicked in and it would just pump oil out the side, and that's where it was leaking. Took it apart, pressed in the new seal, got everything situated, and it hasn't leaked a drop. And it had 27 miles on it when it did that, I think 27 or so, but I'm almost to 100 now, and it's been pretty leak free, so I can't complain too much about it. Now, that's been pretty much the extent of the problems with this motorcycle. I got the high mount exhaust that they offer extra. I'm not a fan of high mounts, but none of the Honda Grom aftermarket exhaust will bolt onto this, so if you want a bolt-on exhaust, you basically get what they got, and that's about it. If you can fabricate and weld your own, then you're going to do fine. Let's see. So, onto the bike itself now, because that was my problems. Aside of that, those hiccups, and aside of all that going on, it all got taken care of. Not exactly in the time frame and the manner I would like, but I mean, they did hold up their end of the bargain, where any problems I had, they took care of, mostly. There wasn't anything they could really do about the motor being drenched in oil, because we didn't know if it was messed up or not, so I just kind of let that go at that. But the bike showed up, had a damaged fairing from packing tape, peeled off the paint. They sent me a new fairing. So, not a big deal, especially considering I was going to change the fairings on the bike. The fairings that come on these bikes naturally are super cheap and super brittle, and if you look at them, they're going to crack, and anyone who's had one will tell you the same thing. So I went and bought all new Grom fairings and wound up, I went with this pearl red from a 2018 Honda Grom, ordered them all brand new, and the fairings cost me about $200, so to me that's not bad for, this road sucks. Excuse me. But it's not too bad of a price for what you get for the quality of the fairings for having actual Grom fairings, and they about 99% bolts up. There's a few little things you just kind of gotta push in the right direction, but it all went together pretty painlessly. I changed out the rear tail light because it comes with this weird diamond shaped one and wired in a factory Grom tail light. I ordered a Honda Grom fender eliminator, but the thing with these bikes that if you're gonna do that and you get one, this thing mimics the Honda Grom SF, but it's got a lot of similarities with the OG Honda Grom, which is the 2015 and older. So what you wind up with is you got to figure out which parts work where. And the fender eliminator, the one that works with the clones, is the one from the OG, because of the way the tail end is set up. So if you're getting one of these, keep that in mind. Bar end mirrors, I wound up changing the bars out, some pro tapers. I got the Honda little pad here just to kind of clean it up some. The biggest differences between this and a Grom are obviously the fact that this is carbureted. It's not the high quality Honda motor that you would get on a Grom, but it does well, it does alright. A lot of parts are interchangeable, and then there's a lot of parts that are not interchangeable. This thing, with the new carburetor that's on here, it still has a choke, but it's a manual choke on the carburetor. The thing about the Mikuni is when you get it dialed in just right, you almost never have to use a choke. Since I've put it on here, I've not needed a choke. So it starts up normal like any other motorcycle would, and I've started it up in 30-degree weather, and it didn't take anything. Sometimes, like you saw after it got gas, you have to give it an extra bump and it starts, but that's it. For the most part, it fires up on a flick. So, I mean, I've got no real complaints in how the running power is on this. A carbureted engine definitely doesn't run as smooth as a fuel-injected engine, so I mean, as atmosphere changes, as things change, you know, it's not correcting itself like a fuel-injected vehicle will, so sometimes you get little hiccups here and there, but it's never anything extreme. Or it's not even really anything hardly noticeable even. But like I was saying, if you want a Grom and can't afford it and on a budget, this is a good way to go. If you want something that you're going to heavily modify, this is a good thing to start with because you're saving over $1,000 from the get-go. That's $1,000 you can put into everything else to make it what you want it to be. The carburetor itself cost me $20. The jets cost me like $6. So the fuel line, I paid for a new fuel line because I put different carburetor on it. That was like $10 for fuel line. Deleting the emission system, that didn't cost you anything. So that's up to you how involved you want to get in something. If you're going to build a bike, you're pretty much competent enough to take care of anything that needs to be done on this. If you're looking for something that's guaranteed reliability all the time, gonna work for you right when you get it, just jump and go, this is not for you. Nothing Venom sells is gonna be for you if that's what you expect. Sorry, nothing against Venom, but these Chinese clone bikes are not for inexperienced people who don't know how to work on something. And by that, I don't mean if you know how to change your oil, that's not enough. You need to be familiar with the inside of motors, how they work, what symptoms there are. These are carbureted engines, so it's different technology. There's no computer you're going to plug in and find out what's wrong. Excuse me. You have to be able to feel what's wrong with this bike. If you can do that, and you want something to wrench on, you'll have a good time with this. Anyway, we're going to cut it off there. This is the Venom X20 from Venom Motorsports. You know, you can base your opinions on it. Hope you enjoyed the video.